Hello, everybody. Thanks, Matt, for the introduction. Can you guys hear me from this distance? Sorry? Okay. Can you hear me from this distance? Great. Hey, everyone. It's great to be in New York. My name is Keith Horwood. I'm the creator of Nodal. Some of you may have heard of the framework. Some of you may not have. The goal of this talk today is to really give you a good high-level introduction to what Nodal is, kind of like why I created it, and why you might be interested in using it. I'd really like to, I'm in this mode where I'm trying to get as much feedback from the community as possible. I'm actively looking for contributors and people to help me with the project. So if you're interested, if this is something that appeals to you, reach out to me. I'll give you more details on how to do that at the end of the talk. Okay, so to start with, what is Nodal? Nodal is a Node.js server for serving API requests, essentially, JSON-based API responses. It's stateless, so we're distinctly not stateful. We don't use socket connections at all. The reason for that is because stateless RESTful API endpoints are something that are very easy to reason about. People have been writing RESTful API backends for literally decades at this point. We understand how they work. It's single input, single output. You don't deal with the whole messy aspect of state and random incoming messages. It's very easy to reason about. So the point of Nodal is to really be able to start thinking about building your web services in terms of a service-oriented architecture. Now, the senior engineers in the crowds, and probably actually most intermediate, even junior engineers, are going to be aware of what a service-oriented architecture is and why they should use it. There are just a lot of problems with implementing service-oriented architectures off of the get-go when you're trying to rapidly prototype an app. And a lot of that has to do with infrastructure setup. If you're trying to set up a separate back-end service and a separate front-end service, you have to figure out different build and deploy steps for each, and that becomes a nightmare for a lot of people, which is why people tend to default to really easy out-of-the-box solutions like Meteor and the like, where you can deploy it once and then you can prototype something very, very rapidly. Unfortunately, as we're seeing, solutions like this don't necessarily scale the way we want them to, but they're still a really easy target to jump in for prototyping, because yeah, you just don't want to worry about all this stuff, all this overhead that's outside the layer of computation. And the layer of computation is what developers are really best at, right? I mean, I don't know about everyone in this crowd, but when I start writing code, I want to write it and get it out and deliver it to people as quickly as possible. So that's kind of the goal of where we're going with Nodal, and a startup I've founded called Polybit. I'll talk to you guys a little bit more about that at the very end, and I'll open up questions about that if you'd like. So what I'm going to go over here is some of you may have seen the Nodal tutorial, the introduction to Nodal. The intro I'm going to do here is for the people who haven't, and maybe for the people who have, just a little bit of a refresher if you haven't really worked with it yet. So the install path, the way you actually install Nodal, very straightforward and simple. It's, I'm just going through the README here. I've already done these steps on my computer, so you're just going to want to do a straight up npm install Nodal and do it globally. The Nodal repository has the command line interface tools baked in, so you're good to go after that. If you want to use a database, which unless you're just serving pre-caked JSON responses, you're going to want to have models in a database. You're going to want to install Postgres. My recommendation for Postgres on OS 10 is postgresapp.com, postgres.app. Really easy to just get a Postgres server running on port 5432. Okay, so we'll assume that you've gotten through all that. It's a pretty easy setup. You've installed Nodal globally, and you want to start your project. The first command you're going to start with is a simple Nodal new. You're going to get put into, for 1 second, I want to backtrack for a second and say I apologize ahead of time for the slowness of my computer. This is a legacy 2010 MacBook. She's been around for a while, and I can't bring myself to throw her out yet. So, okay, so we're going to start with our Nodal project. The demo project that I always like to go with, just because it's really simple to show examples, is kind of like a Twitter-type API, very simple with just tweets and users. So I usually call it InstaTweet. I think that is going to be taken, so let's call it InstaTwit. Cool. So what Nodal's going to do here is normally you'd see, we used to have an npm install step here. It's really easy to just copy over dependencies from the pre-existing Nodal directory in your computer. And what I'm going to do as I'm walking through this is I want everyone to understand what's going on at a low level here. So we're not scared, nothing here feels magic. I want everyone to really understand what's going on behind the scenes, and that's the way Nodal's written. If you dig into the source code, I've had developers come to me and say, like, hey, I didn't even look at the docs. I was just able to read the source code really easily. That's something we're really proud of and we want to keep with. So the idea is full transparency. We always want developers to really understand what they're doing at every stage. So we've created the app here. So let's copy and paste. Let's copy and paste this line. And we should have our server up and running in a moment. Okay, cool. So the first thing we're going to see here, so before I even load localhost, I want everyone to notice that we have two daemons that have spun up, and we're seeing two messages for HTTP workers, and they're both listing on port 3000. So we're using process clustering here, and there's a very important reason we do this on development. It's to encourage proper design patterns in terms of dealing with stateless architecture. So when I say that Nodal is for stateless API services, like I really mean that. You can't use, or you shouldn't use shared memory in your Node.js thread and expect all of your endpoints to be able to access that memory dump. That's what Postgres is for. So any state that you have in your app, you should ideally be storing in a NoSQL store, like in like a key value store like Redis, or in the Postgres database, which is automatically hooked up with Nodal. So what you'll end up running into here is errors with if you're trying to store stuff in RAM in a single process, you're going to end up running into errors. You're not going to get the same response over and over. It can be frustrating if you don't understand what's going on. So it's very important to like let people know that ahead of time. Don't rely on RAM in your node instance to save or hold any data. Okay, cool. So, okay, Chrome like to load this in the background for me. Thank you, Chrome. Here's the first page we get when we spin up. And so like I said, Nodal is API-centric. The focus of Nodal is to just create API services. Nothing else. It's singularly focused on that. So welcome to your Nodal project. Great. Let's actually see what that endpoint looks like. Open up the project I created. One moment. Yeah, so this is why you update your laptop more than once every 6 years. Okay, we have Institute here. Cool. So let's look at what that controller looks like. We have index controller. We're going to see this really weird syntax here. A lot of people look at this, and it's actually a huge question I get. Why do you have this immediately invoked function expression at the top of your module? Well, the reason is that Node.js doesn't natively support import and export statements yet, and it still uses the common JS module loading system. And I just wanted to standardize way. It's really important to me that frameworks, the utility of a framework is really that it makes decisions for you, so you can build product faster. A lot of developers don't like that, and they, I want to do it my way, whatever. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. The goal of Nodal is to make it so you can build products faster. So we're very opinionated in the way we structure our code base. Some of these patterns will likely change in future releases as kind of like the Node.js support for ES6 and ES 2015 features gets better and better. So we have this module exports line at the top. That's just so you don't run into, if you end up, generally you shouldn't have really long files, but if you end up with a really long file, you often have cases, if you've ever dealt with like a large node project without a lot of opinions, where people can hide like module.exports lines in random spots, and then you have to do a command F for it. I just want to keep everything in one spot. So the bottom of every file is always a return of whatever you want that module to return, and the top of the file is always the module.exports. Exports line. Okay, so in this controller, we're extending from Nodal controller, and we just have this get response, respond with a message, just to show you can edit it. We have hot reloading built into the Nodal daemons for development. So we're going to see hi NYC. Cool. That's interesting. I set up a basic HTTP endpoint. How do I create controllers now if I want to create a different controller? Let's open up a new tab here and start doing some magic. Okay, so if you've ever, a lot of you have probably played with Rails before. And a lot of this borrows heavily from the opinions of Rails and David Heinemeier Hansson. And so you're going to see a lot of similarities, and that's on purpose. I wanted to choose, I'm essentially standing on the shoulders of giants here. So when I'm building Nodal, I'm not trying to create something brand new that nobody's ever seen before. I'm trying to create something based on what the best people in the industry have already kind of told us. This is how we build apps. We're used to it. It's great. Let's keep going. So Nodal G controller, I want to namespace it to v1 because it's the first version of my API. And let's just call it hello. We're going to see some familiar stuff, like if you've dealt with any sort of command line generation tools. Oh, okay. I'm getting, this is the awesome part about live demos. Oh, I'm not in the correct directory. Here we go. What do I call this? Insta-tweet? Cool. Okay, let's create that controller. So the first thing we see is the create line and then the modify. Let's kind of examine what's going on here. So like I said, I want full transparency. So the first thing we'll look at is the controller that was created. And we're going to see a lot of stuff just kind of given to us. The get, post, put, and delete endpoints corresponding to the HTTP verbs. That's straightforward. The render method just takes JSON objects or strings or buffers if you're dealing with file data. And let's look at how the router was modified. So the way we do imports and routing is actually, so like I said, I borrow from Rails. I also borrow from Django a lot. The way we do importing is very, very explicit. So we see generator begin imports. I've actually had to manually say, I want to import this hello controller. And then I have told the router, OK, I'm going to use this routing syntax, and I'm going to use this controller for this route. So that's pretty straightforward. And now when I go to, let's put a get request here and go to hello. I'm going to see the hi response. Cool. Now, that's interesting. I can create endpoints. Well, where does this actually kind of get like sexy? Where does this actually do stuff for me? Now let's look at where we can actually create a model. So Nodal, same sort of syntax. We do Nodal G model. We're going to say the model is tweets. The model is a tweet. We want a body that's a string, and we want a user ID that's an integer. And we're going to see some more magic here behind the scenes. We're going to automatically create the tweet model, and we're going to create the migration. So caked in, built-in migrations out of the box. It's industry standard. I mean, at this point, with modern MVC frameworks, I think that's an expectation. Let's look at the migration. The migration is telling us, oh, cool, this is very similar to a Rails-style syntax. I see I'm creating a table tweets. I have a body, and I can drop the table on the down migration. So this fully supports up forward migrations and rollbacks. I can look at my models. I see tweet.js, and this is a very straightforward model file. So let's see how I can actually interface with this. I can use this syntax for generating controllers, where I can do Nodal G controller and just say for, and I want to say it's for a tweet. So what's going to happen here? I'm going to create the tweets controller again. I did not namespace that to v1, but I have the tweets controller, and we see that we automatically generated some code here. So like I said, in the interest of being explicit, I want people to understand. I'm going to generate some boilerplate code for people when they generate these endpoints, because I want them to really understand what's going on. And the insight there is that most of us, most developers, really learn from hacking. Like, I think we've all been at Stack Overflow and copy and pasted an answer and then hacked it apart to figure out what's doing what. And that's kind of the approach that Nodal takes. We don't want to give developers too much for free. We want to give developers the bare minimum that it's easy for them to reason about and get a product out. But we also want to generate code for them so that when they start hitting edge cases, they know how to hack it and know how to modify it. So we see how we can query immediately without even having to look at documentation. We see, oh, cool, I guess this is how you query the database for tweets. We've imported this tweet model, and we're responding with the list of models here. So let's look at what that endpoint looks like. I'm going to switch over to Postman, great tool if you haven't used it. And I'm going to do localhost 3000, and I believe that's at tweets. Cool. So I'm getting an application error, and this is actually very interesting. We need more explicit errors here, but the reason we're getting an error, cannot read property tweet of undefined, is this tweet model, when we look in the model, is actually trying to set the database and set the schema. Unfortunately, our schema doesn't exist yet because we haven't done a migration. So let's look at Nodal's database commands. We can run nodal db create, which is going to create our database in Postgres. Cool. We can do nodal db prepare. So this is a 3-step process here. Nodal db prepare is going to prepare, like I said, very similar to Rails. It's going to prepare a schema migrations table to keep track of the migrations we've actually done in our database. And finally, we can do nodal db migrate. And once that is complete, when we do a request to here again, great, no more error. It actually exists in our schema. So let's create a tweet. So we had that endpoint that was automatically created. Keep in mind, like aside from just modifying a few little pieces of text, like I haven't written any code yet. And I just want to get this up and running. So let's post to tweets. Let's just post nothing right now. And oh, cool. So I actually had some pre-configured data in here. So I have a tweet now, user ID of null. Let's throw in a few more in there. Let's give them some user IDs. One, hey, Twitter. Cool. So now when I go to this, let's go back to the browser. When I go to this endpoint here, I'm going to see all the tweets I've created. And this is pretty standard. You've all seen this before with like all of the MVC frameworks you've dealt with. Now I'm going to start working with relationships. So not only do we have these tweets that have a body and a user ID, like how do we actually like append a user there? Is it very straightforward? Yes, it is very straightforward. And we do a lot of cool stuff out of the box. So we don't have like extra authentication packages that you have to add. Like I said, we automatically generate a lot of code or some boilerplate code for users so they can hack it themselves and figure out how to deal with edge cases. So I'm going to go nodal g model. And we have a special flag because a user is kind of a special model because we need password encryption. So what's going to happen here is I'm going to create the user model. I'm going to create the migration for the user model, and I'm installing additional packages in this directory. Those packages happen to be the bcrypt package, so we can get blowfish encryption on our user passwords stored in the database. So once this gets going here, as that's going, actually, I can look at the user model, and I'm going to see all this extra code here. Like I said, this is a special model, but I want users to really be able to hack this and like reason about it and understand what's going on. So we see this before save syntax with a callback. The design pattern that Nodal has decided to go with, as a side note, in terms of control flow, asynchronous control flow is the callback pattern. A lot of people have asked for promises. What's interesting about promises is promises do take care of control flow, but they also inadvertently introduce state into your application. And the callback aspect is very, very easy to reason about, and you don't have promises with like unknown state that you could be passing around. That's just like an opinion that we've chosen. Once async and await is available natively in Node, we will probably be moving towards that, because even though that's an abstraction layer on top of promises, it removes that aspect of having to worry about state in your application. Okay, so what's going on here? We're checking to see if the model has changed, if the password of the model has changed. And if it has, we're going to hash the password, we're going to encrypt it, and we also have this verify password method that's available in the model. We also down here see our first example of validations. So we see an email must be valid. There's tons of articles about don't use regex to email validate, but this is an example, just to make sure it has an @ symbol in the middle of it. And your password has to be 5 characters. We want to create the controller for that, remember? Oh. I have an npm install issue with bcrypt. 1 second. See if I can get that going again. If not, I'm just going to take out that before save method and remove bcrypt, and we should be good. Okay, cool. Wicked. So, still running my server. Let's create the controller for, same thing, nodal g controller, and I'm going to do for user. It's going to do all my fun stuff again. And when I post to the user endpoint, is that good? Okay, when I post to the user endpoint, oh, no, I don't have bcrypt. Okay, in the meantime, while that's installing, I'm going to show you guys how, I'd love to show you an example of that working. I'm going to show you guys how model relationships work. Same thing, very similar to patterns you're familiar with. What I'm going to do is I'm going to write user.joined in the model definition. I'm going to write user.joined by. I'm going to say it's joined by tweet, and it's a has many relationship. So multiple is going to be true. Now I have to actually import tweets in here. So const tweet. So Nodal has a special nodal.require method that will automatically, it just requires base path to the base path of your application. So I'm going to do nodal require at models tweet.js. And I'm going to go into my tweet model and require my user. And same sort of thing, I'm going to do tweets.joins2, user and multiple true. So the way that the joining works is joins2 always indicates like a child to parent relationship, whereas a joined by always represents a parent to child relationship. The reason for declaring, it's kind of redundant to declare it in both files, you might think. Why do I have to do it in both? The way that Nodal works, thinking about like a stateless architecture and that this server could be anywhere in the world and you could have thousands of instances spun up at the same time, we want to make sure that when a user hits that endpoint, if they want to join from tweet, all you want to do is load the tweet. They might only require the tweet model, but then say they're joining in the user model. I'll show you in a second in a query. So you just want to always have that redundancy there to make sure that you're not missing any expectations of the user when they're joining in tables. I'll show you what I mean in a second. Let's hope. Okay, bcrypt's not going to install. So sorry? Oh, yeah, sorry. Great, thank you. So what I'm going to do is I'm a user that's using Nodal, and I've encountered this issue where for some reason my node package or my node install won't install bcrypt. How can I deal with this effectively? Well, let's say I want users, but maybe I don't want to encrypt passwords. I can look at this and say, okay, all this code has been generated for me. I can remove this before save methods, and I can simply do, here I can do callback this, and don't give it an error. Cool, so the password will always be verified with this method. All right. Okay, so canary property table, I got to do my migration again. And when I send a post, message not found. Okay, users. Okay, cool. So now I don't have to worry about bcrypt being installed. I managed to hack that out pretty quickly. I'm getting my validation errors from the validates part of the model that I showed you before. So let's create a valid user here so we can start seeing how joining works. Key, email, and password is going to be password. Awesome. So I created a user. I can go to my get endpoint for users, and you'll see the exact same thing. So I can see the list of all available users. Now, you'll see that you can actually see the password here, and that's not good. We don't want our users seeing a password. We can save that and prevent the clients from ever seeing passwords, by just writing an extra line here, user.hides passwords. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to do a post again. And now password's no longer in there. Cool. Now let's get into some joins. So I already set up the joins aspect of the models. So now in tweet, I can add this one line here, and I can say I want to join user. That's not going to be good enough. So what Nodal does by default, and this is just default behavior so people don't end up shooting themselves in the foot and you don't end up with circular reference issues, is that we allow, when you're responding to an API response, we allow for you to provide essentially like an interface or a schema for the type of data you're responding with. So let's just see what this looks like on the tweets table with that join. Cool. So we have that join line there, but we don't see a user popping up. And this is actually an error people get a lot and ask about. So if you're doing this yourself, you'll probably encounter this. The easy fix is you just have to specify what fields you want to show here. So it's an array. I can say ID, body, and then I want to say user to indicate that I'm joining in the user. And cool. So now, very simply, the users have now been joined into the responses. Now, this response nesting actually works indefinitely. And I want to show you guys an example of why we do this and where it gets interesting. Nodal actually has full GraphQL support. To our version of the spec has full GraphQL support out of the box. And so this interesting thing about joining is you can join indefinitely and create really awesome complex queries. We actually have a GraphQL syntax tree parser that will convert it into something that the Nodal ORM understands and create all your joins for you. So this is an example of a Nodal server. This is available on my GitHub at nodal-graphql, so you can actually see and download the implementation and play with it yourself. So I have a few users here. I have threads, I have posts, and I can actually get this super nested response here containing all of the users. So I have Game of Thrones references, and you can do this with any sort of setup that you want. You can join. In fact, you can like even join in things multiple times later in the query. I'll show a crazy example here. Like here's something crazy. We're joining in the user, and we're putting a filter on it. And then in the post, we're saying we want to join in the user again. It still works flawlessly. So that's something interesting you can do with the way we've set up joins. And yeah, GraphQL support out of the box. So that's like a really relatively quick overview of the sort of things you can do with Nodal. So I hope you guys see where we're heading, kind of see the utility of it. With very little code, I was able to get like a lot done and a lot of complex logic that I'll be able to interface with from my client. So the ideal use case here is that if you really want to quickly set up like an API server that's ultra scalable, I'll get to the scaling thing in a second, you can start up a Nodal project and focus on getting your front end done and get your back end logic done super, super quickly as a decoupled API service. Now what I'm working on with Polybit, my startup, is we're actually providing an out-of-the-box deployment and scaling solution for Nodal applications. So the idea being that we're working on some pretty neat infrastructure that's quote-unquote, nothing's indefinite, but quote-unquote, indefinitely horizontally scales. And that's why we have this big focus on stateless, because we have to be able to scale to a huge degree, and that can't work with just one node instance. So yeah, if you'd like to know more about that, feel free to email me at keith@polybit.com with any questions you have about Nodal or about the startup I'm working on. Follow me on Twitter. I'm at KeithWHOR. And yeah, I'd like to open the floor, I guess, to any questions you all have.
How do you compare Nodal to Loopback?
To Loopback. So the goal of Nodal is to just be like super, super highly opinionated and structured. So Nodal relies, instead of being like one, it's ES6, and two, instead of relying on the traditional sort of view of like the node ecosystem of like kind of like choose your own adventure, we just rely on the previously established like standards, sort of like curated traditional aspect of like Rails and Django. So. JSON Web Tokens. Yeah, we have preliminary support. So we've had a couple of contributors working with JSON Web Tokens. We don't have completely native support out of the box at this point. If that's something you'd be interested in helping us with and contributing with, that would be awesome. We do have access token support out of the box. I haven't shown it in this presentation. It would just take another 10 minutes to show you. But we can do this. Sorry, we have OAuth2 support with access tokens. We have this special access token model. That's automatically going to actually connect with your user model and do some cool stuff, where we automatically create access tokens and join in your users and actually look at like the bearer, set the correct token type and set that on the client side.
The second question is, did you take a look at Sales.js? What some of the concepts?
Yeah. So Sales.js is an interesting project. One of the reasons I personally didn't use Sales.js was when I was looking at the node ecosystem, when I started working on Nodal, I wasn't really happy with the state of like not having strong opinions. Sales was based on like ES5 JavaScript at the time. And right when I started working on Nodal, or a little bit into working on Nodal, the IOJS Node.js split happened. And I saw this great opportunity to use something that a lot of people were like scared of at the time, but the ES6 class syntax to bring the design patterns and paradigms that we're all used to from Rails and Django, I'm going to keep repeating this, to use those sorts of design patterns and bring them to Node, which lowers the barrier to entry to the Node ecosystem to a lot of people coming from like other languages. And I thought that represented a great opportunity. And that was like kind of the initial push to really like get Nodal out there, is to bring these design patterns that everyone knew and loved and allowed us to really quickly and easily create server-side apps to the Node.js community. So.
What is the biggest app running on that? Could you like check with the
Sure. So in an older version of RIP, actually. So in an older version of Nodal, we were actually running some front-end services at Storefront. I was working at a company called Synthago, who is an awesome biotech company, doing some cutting-edge stuff. We were running the entire back-end architecture for their sales, for their like sales pipeline in Nodal. And as far as I'm aware, no large enterprise companies have started picking up Nodal yet. We've only been, for the record, we've only been live 3 months. So it was only 3 months ago that I made like the Hacker News post. I actually fully documented everything that we had. So I'm really excited to actually like work with people and see if anyone's interested in having the support and working alongside to see if we can start creating larger projects and create a larger ecosystem out of this. So.
Did you roll your own ORM for this, or did you use C++?
No, I rolled my own ORM from scratch. So one of the reasons for rolling my own ORM was to support all of the nesting and GraphQL features I wanted to do. So the way I managed to structure the ORM and model relationships is we literally just behind the scenes just create a graph of all the relationships. So the translation to GraphQL, once you have a very simple syntax tree parser for GraphQL, makes the implementation super, super easy. I was able to roll out my GraphQL implementation in like less than a day. And so that was the main goal of that. I also wanted an ORM that was I really, really fell in love with Django's ORM when I was working with Django in my first job in Toronto. And I wanted to be able to recreate that. Something interesting that I actually didn't show you guys that we can do, I'll show you right now, that I love about the ORM and I kind of love about Django's syntax and borrowing from that, is if I look at my tweets controller here, let's, sorry, I lost track of my. Okay, so I see my tweets here, and I have the body hey. I can do something like this, like body starts with. And you can have these automatic filters that literally work from the browser URL or the query parameters out of the box that match one-to-one with the type of syntax you're actually writing in the ORM, which is something really powerful because it allows front-end developers to have a really robust control over what they're doing. And we actually do have like a pattern matching aspect. You might look at that like, oh, what if I don't want people querying by password or whatever? Well, one, we have our equivalent of strong parameter support. So I'm using all of the query parameters here, but I can do like .permit. I can show you how it works, but I can essentially add .permit body, and then when I do this, it's just not going to count it. But if I do body equals hey, it's going to allow it. So yeah, and that was kind of the goal. So I actually initially came from like a front end, sort of mainly front end role. My first applications I was ever developing were like games in Visual Basic and DirectX and C++ and OpenGL. And so when I was first in the web, I was mostly developing like client-side applications. So I wanted a really powerful way to query databases from the front end. And I think that's actually something interesting GraphQL can do. But I wanted to make sure that the front-end developers kind of had that control out of the box. And that was one of the many reasons I decided to roll my own ORM. So I hope that answers your question. That was a very long answer to a short question.
I really like how your scaffolding works on building to the test quickly. Can you show us a peek into the test directory?
Into the test directory? Sure. Cool. So in the test directory, we have these tests that are automatically created. Yeah, that's actually an interesting question. I've never done like a screencast on tests. So we have tests essentially baked in like out of the box. So we have our own test runner, which is based on Mocha. So like I said, the goal of frameworks is to be opinionated and provide people stuff out of the box. So we provide Mocha out of the box, and we allow you to still use pretty much Mocha syntax in a more structured way that kind of follows like the nodal design patterns. That allows you to write tests for your endpoints. So we'll see, let's see if this is going to run here. Some of this stuff is a work in progress as we update versions, so I haven't prepared this for this talk, and let's just hope it's going to work out of the box. Cool. Awesome. That was a scary moment there for a second. So actually, we see that within our test framework, we can actually test endpoint responses. So we have like comprehensive tests for all of your endpoints. Expect status to equal 200. You can generate tests with generators, just like anything else. Nodal gtest, my test. And it's automatically going to create a new test for you and set up the scaffolding. And yeah, that's the setup of the test framework there. Cool.
Why don't you create the test based on the controller and the model
You can. So you can test it in the tests. You can literally test anything. You can import controllers and test their methods individually. The default tests I just include, so you can literally do anything you want in these tests. The default tests I just included is something that's been very helpful for me, is actually having full control over like full integration tests for actually your HTTP endpoints. You want to make sure, for example, I'll give an example case. It's very useful very early on to make sure that like your access tokens are getting set properly, that your users are working properly, that password hashing is working properly. So I just wanted to make sure that I included this this integration test for endpoints. But yeah, you can literally test anything. It's just this is just a really light wrapper over Mocha. So anything you do with Mocha. Automatic test creation for okay. Yeah, it's something that we haven't done yet. The opportunity's there. It's the boilerplate is pretty straightforward. Anytime you create a controller, we can automatically create a test for that controller as well. So yeah, that's interesting. Actually, nobody's brought that up to me, but that's an obvious low-hanging fruit. So thank you.
Do you have deep logging integration similar to how Westify?
Sorry.
Deep logging.
Deep. Sorry, you'll have to clarify with me. I'm not familiar with.
Sure. How Westify already has the ability for you to get a deep log of all your requests.
Oh, deep logging. So in terms of like, sorry, you're asking in terms of like a stack trace for all of your requests? So yeah, you can do full, so yeah, we support full stack traces in the development environment. With what I'm building with Polybit, with the with the indefinitely scalable API service, that's something we're really interested in working on, and it's going to be interesting because we have some unique infrastructure behind the scenes. So to answer your question, in the stuff we're working on in production that we're prototyping right now, no, but we will soon. It's a top priority. But in terms of development, you stack trace and do login in the same way that you do it in a normal Node.js app. So. Yes and no. So to go back to the point of the most value of frameworks being provided by enforcing strong opinions for people, we've chosen to go with Postgres because, Postgres is an amazingly performant, awesome database. It's constantly, it can act, it's constantly back and forth. But there have been articles about how it's a better NoSQL store even than MongoDB, which is pretty interesting. We have the ability in the Nodal code base, so I'll refer to GitHub here, just because I think it'll be easier than getting my slow computer to open up Atom. If we look in the core, we can look at the required folders in the database. So we actually have this adapters folder, and we have the Postgres adapter. There is the ability to write other adapters, and it's pretty straightforward. Coming from the creator of the framework, it's pretty straightforward to create new adapters. There just hasn't been a focus on it. It was on the roadmap to create a MySQL adapter, but honestly, the amount, it's a tricky rabbit hole to go down. The second I start diverting my attention from being like the best API service, my intention is to create the best API service out of the box possible. And the second I divert my attention away from that, I want to ship product. And the second I start diverting my attention away from that, I increase, one, the surface area of the code base, potentially exponentially, depending on how many new ideas and opinions I let in, and I get totally distracted from the core competency, I believe, of what Nodal offers. So yes and no is the answer to your question. Cool. All right, I think I will close it out there. It's been about 40 minutes, I think, and Matt's looking excited to move on to the next thing. So thank you, everybody. I encourage you to check out Nodal on your own, start us on GitHub, contribute, email me, keith@polybit.com. I'd love to hear your feedback. Even if anyone's interested in like meeting for coffee to learn more about the project, reach out at any time. I'm almost available 24 hours a day. I like to pretend I never sleep. So thank you, everyone.